Hi there, it's Stacy. I'm so glad you can make it here today with me. We are making homemade sauerkraut. I will have a recipe and list of everything you'll need for making fermented sauerkraut in the description below, so check that out. We're gonna start off with a full head of cabbage. You'll want to take off the wilted alder leaves and discard of those, but please remember to keep, I would say, 2 or 3 good leaves and set those aside. We'll be using that for later. Now you'll want to have kosher salt. I use the coarse kind. Seems to work pretty good. Caraway seed, and we do add dill. Most recipes don't call for dill, but just by experimenting, I tried it one time and it really made the sauerkraut taste better. So that's my secret ingredient. You can chop up your cabbage as thinly or as thick as you wish. I guess we're not too particular, but I do it pretty thin when I cut my cabbage up. You can also use a food processor, and I did try to use a food processor once. Our family did not like how fine the cabbage was after using that, so that's completely up to you. It's probably easier to use a food processor, but I really don't mind chopping it up. Just make sure your knife is really sharp and be careful. So remember in the beginning when I told you that I only used half of the cabbage, so that is half of a cabbage chopped up. I am going to add a tablespoon of the coarse kosher salt. I'm going to sprinkle that in there, and then I'm going to start mixing the cabbage mixture by hand. And what this does, it starts to break down the cabbage. Not only is the salt for flavor, but the salt breaks down the fibers of the cabbage, and it will make them more wilty. I don't know what to say. And it will start forming a liquid. So once you start doing this for a few minutes, you're really going to see it starting to break down and wilt. That just means the salt's doing its job, and you're doing a great job mixing it. Okay, well, this is the funner part. So you want to add a tablespoon of the caraway seed. If you look at the cabbage, you can tell from me mixing it for about 5 to 10 minutes, it really did break down. This is the dill weed. You can use up to a tablespoon. That's completely up to you. Like I said, it's my secret ingredient. So just add what you want to it. So once we filled up our jar, with the whole half of the cabbage. You really want to squish it down in the jar. This is the last part before we use the cabbage leaf. We're going to put the cabbage leaf on top of our cabbage mixture in the jar. You want to make sure that there are no bits of cabbage on the inside of the jar. You want all the cabbage, once it starts breaking down and creating that liquid, to be covered completely in that liquid. You never want any cabbage sticking up or out of the fermenting liquid process. It'll start to grow mold. Now, just a warning, after it's been sitting out for a while, it will be creating a lot of that liquid. And as long as you don't fill your jar too full with the cabbage mixture, you'll be okay. But I filled it up too full in the past, and it did kind of seep out of the jar and made a mess on the counter. Really, no big deal. You just clean it up and it'll be fine. This is where we put the leaf that we set aside, and we squash it in there. Make sure it's pressing down on your cut up cabbage mixture. I use a small jelly jar to put in the center of that leaf, and that just helps things stay weighed down, because you do want all that cut up cabbage to be in the liquid. And there you go, you've made your own homemade fermented sauerkraut. You'll want to have that sit out on the counter or wherever 7 to 10 days. The first day you'll want to continually squish down the weighted portion in the middle until all that liquid starts forming. And like I said, just make sure that the liquid is covering your sauerkraut and you'll be good to go. I chopped up some potatoes for roasted potatoes. Preset the oven at 400. Gosh, I really apologize for the lighting. I'm not sure what happened, but it was really sunny outside, so I think that kind of messed with the camera a little bit. But here I chopped up the potatoes and popped them in that plastic bowl. Here I add about a 1/4 cup of olive oil in a bowl right here. You can use any kind of oil. We prefer olive. It does not matter at all. I also used some onion powder. I didn't measure that. I usually don't measure things, so I do apologize if you prefer measurements. If you do, let me know, and I will make sure to measure out everything for you. But I used some dill, onion powder, some pepper, and salt, and I added them all in there. Now what I'm going to do after I mix up this little mixture, I'm going to pour it over the potatoes in that plastic container and shake it up so they're coated really well. You just spread them on the baking sheet, and I had them in the oven for 20 minutes. I took them out and went ahead and flipped all the potatoes over and put them back in for another 10 to 20 minutes. You'll want to go in there with a fork and make sure the potatoes are done all the way. But they came out really, really good. For the sauerkraut recipe, I used beef smoked sausage and 1 quart of our homemade sauerkraut. After cutting up the sausage, I cooked those on medium-low heat. I did use a little splash of oil to make sure they didn't stick. I cooked those for about 15 minutes until they were heated through and lightly browned. I went ahead and added the kraut, or if you didn't like sauerkraut or didn't have any, you could cut up some cabbage and put that in there instead. That would still be really, really good. I let that cook all together for about a half an hour, stirring it a few times. I did put a lid on top. That kind of helps the moisture stay in there and helps it cook. But you just serve it with the potatoes, and it came out really good, and the flavor of the kraut was just amazing with the potatoes as a side. I hope you really enjoy this recipe. Thanks so much for coming along with me as I made sauerkraut and shared one of my favorite easy recipes. Hopefully this video will help with meal ideas. Please subscribe, like, and push the notification bell. Hope you have a very blessed day.